Hi, you are watching Manhwa Caster. Get ready for an amazing story and enjoy. The story starts showing a guy kneeling on the ground. His name is Suho. He is a civil servant and a swordsman. He is the main character of our story, and he has been poisoned by his comrades. Suho was remembering all that they went through together. They even fought side by side, and he thinks of them as friends, but it was all a lie. Then, a man spoke and advised Suho to stop being so stubborn. His name is Alex Morgan, a warrior. Then a woman spoke and mocked Suho, stating, "Even so, who is the known sword god? He is nothing but a fool. She is Suzuki Endo and she is a mage." So who shouted back at them that what they are doing is wrong. Then another girl stated that Suho is the only one opposing their plan. She is Isabella, a healer. Then another guy butt in and trying to convince Suho to join them and don't close the gates in the whole world. His name is Hexhood, an archer. These guys are worried that once they close the gate, the hunters like themselves are going to lose their purpose, people's reverence, and they will be feared by the people. Before we continue, let me just point out, Suho is a swordsman and he fight with that outfit? With lanyard and ID dangling on his neck? Come on writers, artist, you forcing it into the script that he's a civil servant? I even tweaked some lines so that it won't get cringy. Anyway, back to the story. On the next frame, it shows that they cornered Suho in the cliff. While the archer guy was trying to convince Suho, Suho replied that he just stabbed him in the back. Suho's veins are popping out, signs of the poison getting worse. He was thinking that he has no time left and he knows that he won't survive. At his final act of defiance for humanity, he will take out at least one of them. He is giving his all in this one last attack. A huge surge of energy came out from Suho, which surprised and scared the toot out of his former comrades. Then, Suho launched and cut the warrior's arm. Then Suho decapitate the mage head, killing her. Suho tried to connect the attack to the healer and archer, but they stepped back quickly. The archer was confused on what happened. He probably pooped on his pants. The healer tried to heal the warrior's arm, but it did not heal. Then, she realized that Suho awakened a great power right before his own death. Suho awakened a skill that was said to be a myth, the intangible sword. After forcing himself, his body collapsed and he fell from the cliff. While thinking he finally awakened the said skill, then it happened. Suho was bombarded with system notification. He reached Divine Sword Unity, Ultimate Swordsmanship, Mastered Formless Sword, acquiring an SS rank skill. The system wished to make Suho to become stronger and to reach Transcendent Realm. Then, the moment we are waiting for, the system rebooted for player on Suho. Suho barely waking up, then a flash of light. Suho was startled and jolt up. Then Suho realized that a firefighter was carrying him. The firefighter assured Suho that he will be taking him to safety. Suho was confused on what was going on. He knows he died. He noticed something. An enormous energy is forming and monsters are everywhere. Suho saw the signage and thinks to himself that Syndrome was contaminated before due to gate outbreak. Then, an arrow pierced the firefighter's back, making the two of them fall to the ground. A goblin was walking towards them. The firefighter asked Suho to run away quickly. However, our boy MC won't be an MC if he just run away. So, he picked up the firefighter's axe and walked towards the monsters. The firefighter was scolding him to run away. Suho didn't listen and hurled the axe towards one of the goblin, hitting one goblin in the head, killing it. Then, system notifications pop up, saying that he awakened as a player, and the system wished that Suho become strong. The system asked Suho what power he wants to acquire. While Suho was thinking it was the same time when he started to become a player, the system gave the options: warrior, mage, archer, and healer. He was about to pick the warrior class when he stopped and asked the system to delay the selection. Then, Suho said to the firefighter that he does not need to worry since he can handle the goblins by himself. Surprising the firefighter, Suho charged at the group of goblins, killing the ones in the front. Then, Suho picked up a sword on the ground and pointing at the other goblins, scaring the other goblins on the next scene. Goblins are dying one after the other. In the end, Suho stands in the middle of the dead goblins while Suho was looking at his sword, feeling the anger for his old comrades. He calmed himself and was thinking of his situation. He concluded that he returned back in time when he became a player. Then, a bunches of system notification pop up again, showing his achievement. Then he asked the system to show him the class option again. Surprisingly, Suho chose to be a healer. The firefighter asked if Suho is a player, and Suho said yes. The system asked Suho if he was sure, and Suho confirmed. Suho acquired a healing skill, Healing Light, which was a Class F skill. Then, Suho healed the firefighter's wound using his newly acquired skill. Then, the system gave Suho a small gift for his first time healing someone. The system let Suho choose a weapon. Then a light formed on Suho's hand, and it forms to a beginner's sword. Even Suho choose a healer class, he will still use a sword as his main weapon. Then, Suho decided to clear the gate alone, making the firefighter worried. While walking towards the gate, Suho thinks to himself that the skills acquired based on talents can be used freely no matter the class was. Enjoying the show? Please help us reach 1,000 subscribers. We wish to be a content creator for so long. Please subscribe. Your support means more than you know. Thank you. Now, back to the story.
In his first life, Isabella's Holy Spirit Light also began as Healing Light. If only Suho could have healed his wounds back then, the outcome of the fight would have been different. So this time, he would become both a swordsman and a healer. To prevent history from repeating itself, he has to become stronger faster than those guys. So he needs to acquire skills quickly and level up. By now, Suho was already close to the gate's entrance. If he remembered correctly, this gate was an unpredictable premonition gate. In his past life, he almost died because of this gate, but now it's different. His skill level is low, so it might be difficult, like before, but that's okay since the swordsmanship that was engraved in his mind remains the same, so he can just start over again. Suho stretched out his hand to enter the gate, and after a few seconds of dramatic entrance, he entered the gate with green leaves around him. The system told him that the gate's name was Green Red Gate. Suho began moving, and as he walked, he saw goblin remains all over the place. He thought to himself that the goblins who were rampaging outside the gate, as if it were their world, were all dead inside. It seemed they had escaped through the gate, running away from something. After a short pause, Suho heard a growling sound, and indeed, those were what the goblins had been running from, and why the gate was named Green Red. 2 red hobgoblins appeared, one at level 10 and the other at level 12. They slayed the goblins they carried and pointed their swords at our protagonist. Suho was like, do these guys really see me as their new prey instead of the goblins? Hobgoblins' skin is red, unlike regular goblins. They also have larger bodies and stronger muscles. Nevertheless, they are still goblins, except with extra features. As Suho was thinking but thought, one of the hobgoblins attacked, and he quickly blocked it. Suho took a few steps back and thought to himself that right now, his level was too low to cut through their skin. So he just needed to find their weakness and exploit it. Suho leaped from his spot and went straight for the eyes of the level 10 hobgoblin. Of course, this would be impossible if there was a huge level difference, or if the monster's characteristics were significantly superior. But a mere hobgoblin isn't much of a big deal to our protagonist. As Suho stabbed its eye, he dragged out the eyeballs, and the hobgoblin fell to the ground. Suho was terrified by his own viciousness, shocked that he had killed the hobgoblin out of habit, but he couldn't help it. Now on to the second one, he has to be careful not to kill it. He needs to make use of it until he finds another one. As he turned back, he could see the anger in the hobgoblin's eyes. The monster charged at him, but Suho turned its attacks into a game of dodge. The hobgoblin was attacking with strength, but Suho effortlessly dodged each attack. Dear listeners, in this system of warriors and hunters, if a player repeats a certain action several times, the player can acquire a skill related to that action. If Suho keeps avoiding the hobgoblin's attacks like this, he can acquire a skill known as dodge. Suddenly, the system sent a message that he had acquired the dodge skill. With a proud grin, Suho said to himself that since he had acquired dodge, next up was parry. Parrying has a deep history with dedicated weapons for it, and it's an essential skill that serves as the foundation for all other important skills. After a few sword clanks, the system congratulated him on successfully mastering the parry skill, but it was unfortunate he obtained the parry skill before the hobgoblin got tired. If so, he'd be done with the hobgoblin, and bang, he sliced the hobgoblin's head off its shoulders. Suho, still not satisfied, like some ladies in bed, said he needed to find other hobgoblins to slay. On the other hand, people were gathered outside the gate. They couldn't enter as it was locked. But our protagonist was already inside. One of the guys angrily asked, "Who dares barge into the gate without permission? What faction does he belong to?" Another guy added that he would give our protagonist a hard time when he comes out. The guy in red said it would be legendary if he ended up dying inside the gate. On Sindorm Street, a man in a suit was questioning the brigadier about the person who entered the gate solo. The brigadier explained everything that happened, and after listening, the man in the suit was like, "So you're trying to tell me a beginner player entered the gate alone?" "Yes," the brigadier replied. He said that from the way our protagonist spoke, he seemed like he had just become a player. The brigadier told the man in the suit that the guy had dealt with a group of goblins alone, then entered the gate after healing his wounds. The guy had said there was something to be gained from the gate. The man in the suit said that they weren't that late, yet the guy had already dealt with all those goblins, and on top of that, a healer. That's ridiculous. Given that all the monsters dealt with were goblins, the gate itself doesn't seem too difficult, but it would be crazy to think a healer could conquer the gate all by himself. And that he's able to take out a bunch of goblins this easily without getting a scratch. What the hell does that guy think he's doing? The man in the suit wondered. He was scared for what might happen to our protagonist, and felt he must have entered the gate without thinking, because there's no way a healer would be crazy enough to enter a gate alone. However, if he managed to clear the gate, if that happened, then no matter what, they must make that person one of theirs. The man in the suit ordered his subordinate to report to him if there were any changes in the gate, and he should report immediately if anyone came out of the gate. Inside the gate, our protagonist was busy slaying monsters and leveling up. If I were the system, I would have gotten tired of sending congratulatory messages. After slaying a certain group of hobgoblins, one of them didn't die and was bleeding. Suho told the hobgoblin that he would let it go, so it should bring its friends. The hobgoblin, who seemed to understand, got up and began running. Suho yelled that it should bring as many friends as it could. Now, Suho decided to manage his stats while waiting for the other hobgoblins to come. He said it's best to raise all stats evenly rather than focusing on just one. Suho had received quite a few bonus stats and had slain a lot of monsters, so he was able to level up easily. Suho had acquired most of the basic attacks, and the next thing he wanted to achieve in the gate should be somewhere around him. So, he looked around the corpses of the hobgoblins and saw a red gemstone. Although Suho wasn't expecting it, fortunately, it was there. He wasn't sure about other things, but he knew he had to take this. The item was a magic stone, and with its size, he could sell it for 50,000 won. It was also a D-grade magic stone. In the past life, Suho wouldn't have bothered to collect something this small, but he was running low on money right now. He decided to search more thoroughly, and after a few minutes of searching, he gathered the last piece and added it to his inventory. He gathered about 20 magic stones, and if he sold everything, the profit would be quite nice. Suddenly, Suho heard a rumbling sound and quickly took a defensive stance. He said to himself that the hobgoblins were finally here. Now, if he took down this group as well, the boss would definitely appear. There were about 30 of them, and they would make for some good experience points before facing the boss. The hobgoblin that Suho had recently spared called his friends to get revenge. In their language, the hobgoblin told its friends that this was the guy who had injured him, and with bloodlust, they all yelled to kill Suho. They all attacked, but our protagonist was chill, standing like some villain ready to cause great destruction. And bang, he jumped into the air and began slaying the hobgoblins. After a few sword displays, there were still a lot of hobgoblins left, but Suho said he would finish it quickly. Suddenly, he felt a huge presence with a powerful attack coming at him. Using his sixth sense, he quickly dodged the attack. With a smile, Suho said, "Finally, the boss is here." The chief hobgoblin, also the dungeon boss, is a level 20 monster. It attacked Suho despite his attempt to exchange pleasantries. Seems like the boss monster is an introvert. As if that wasn't enough, the other hobgoblins joined their boss to attack Suho, so attacks were coming from different angles. Suho yelled that these small fries shouldn't interrupt when the big dogs are fighting, and in anger, he slayed all the hobgoblins, leaving only the boss. Suddenly, the chief hobgoblin began to roar as the boss monster. It used fear as its skill. Suho couldn't look back, and the system notified him that he had fallen into the state of fear, causing his muscles to become stiff. Fear is a skill that induces fear. and its effect increases with higher levels and stats. Suho never expected to encounter a monster using fear in such a low-level gate, but it's a boss monster after all. With a smile as bright as my day, the boss monster moved in to kill Suho. Our protagonist, who couldn't move, thought to himself that without any skill or items for mental protection, he couldn't counter fear right now. But even without skills or items, there's one way to counter it, by inflicting pain on one's body. And bang, Suho used his sword to tear his hand, causing blood to gush out. The system sent a message saying that he had broken free from the state of fear. It was a close call, and he quickly evaded the monster's deadly attack. The chief hobgoblin, with a puzzled face, was surprised that Suho could break free from its fear skill so easily. Suho used his healing light to heal the cut on his hand, and after it was healed, he, ever the dramatic, told the chief hobgoblin that they should enjoy some cozy time, just the two of them. Then bang, he engaged the boss monster in a ferocious battle. The chief hobgoblin fought with intense energy, but Suho kept his main character vibe, fighting with only one hand. Suho thought to himself that due to the level difference, he wasn't dealing significant damage to the boss monster, but the damage was gradually adding up. Then Suho raised his sword and stabbed the boss monster in its thigh, causing green blood to gush out. Suho's plan was to exploit the gaps in the wound to deal a fatal blow to the monster. Suddenly, the boss monster roared, trying to use the fear skill again, but it no longer worked on our protagonist. With a proud grin, Suho thought that once he had overcome fear, it would never consume him again. He pulled his sword from the monster's thigh and bang, landed multiple strikes on the boss monster. The monster yelled in pain and fell to the ground with its big head facing down. Suho, meant to be the villain of this manhwa, bent down as the boss monster lost consciousness and used his healing skill to revive it. The monster, now conscious, was shocked. Suho told it to rise, saying he was far from done. The boss monster was shocked and terrified by his aura. The system notified Suho, saying that he exhibited an overwhelming presence capable of breaking even a boss monster's ferocity. It congratulated him on unlocking a new skill, intimidation. With a smirk, Suho thought to himself that he had mastered intimidation and learned everything possible in this gate. With a kind smile, Suho told the chief hobgoblin that its role was over and it could leave. The boss monster, with a sigh of relief, was about to go, and bang, Suho cut its head off, saying it could go straight to hell. The system notified him that he had mastered decapitation. The chief hobgoblin had been killed, the gate was conquered, and the MVP was on Suho. As the MVP, the system awarded him additional EXP and a bonus stat. Suho had now reached level 10, and the system sent a message saying it wanted to make him even stronger, granting him greater power. Now, his healing light, which heals wounds, had been raised to stage E, and he unlocked a new skill called Cure. Cure is a skill that consumes magic to heal diseases. Seeing this, Suho thought that he no longer needed to worry about getting debuffed. If he continued developing his skills while leveling up, he would be able to cure 10,000 poisons someday. With a smile, he thought to himself that he'd gotten everything he needed here. Having conquered the gate, he decided to go see some familiar faces after a long time. Meanwhile, outside the gate, the crowd was still waiting. Some were growing impatient while others waited as loyally as dogs, but there was no bone this time. Suddenly, the gate's entrance began shrinking, and the whole crowd wondered, had the gate been conquered? Then, another voice echoed, saying someone was coming out. When my cameraman went closer, it was none other than Suho, our protagonist. The whole crowd was in awe, and they wondered what the heck was happening. Did he really conquer the gate alone? Scouts from different guilds came to recruit him, but he refused. Suho knew the guild he wanted, and went directly to the man in the suit. Suho descended from the gate, and we heard, "Hello, team leader Jung Chulmin of the Korean Hunter Association." The man and his team were shocked. One of the subordinates asked the team leader if he knew our protagonist, and the team leader replied that it was his first time seeing him. The man in the suit shook hands with Suho and said, "I am Jung Chulmin from the Gate Management Division of the Korean Hunter Association." Chulmin then asked Suho how he knew him. Did they have some unknown business? Suho replied that they should discuss the details at the association later, as he was going there to get a hunter's license. Chulmin was shocked, wondering how Suho could have conquered the dungeon when he was still a beginner. After arriving at the association office, Chulman thought to himself, since Suho wants a license and not a renewal, then that means he's an unregistered hunter. He's a newly awakened player, and the healer class is the weakest among the 4 class categories. Yet, he conquered a gate alone. It's crazy to even think of. But looking at Suho's results, it seemed more like a warrior than a healer. Suho noticed the confused look on Chulman's face and asked if something was wrong with the results. Chulman replied, "It's nothing," though he was still unsure. He then asked Suho what he normally did for a living. Suho replied that he's just a college dropout. He didn't do well in school, so he had to drop out. Chulman said that normally, people would choose to be warriors or archers. He asked Suho why he chose to be a healer. With a smile, Suho replied that he hate getting hurt. Since Suho had conquered the gate alone, Chulman asked how he did it. Suho shrugged and said there wasn't really any process. I entered the gate, a hobgoblin attacked me, and I just killed it to survive. Chulman was surprised that Suho had even fought a hobgoblin, but now he was even more perplexed when Suho brought out multiple magic stones from his inventory. Suho explained that these were the magic stones he got from killing the hobgoblin and the chief hobgoblin. He said he didn't know the value of each magic crystal and would leave it to Chulman to handle. With a stunned look, Chulman responded that he would process it as quickly as possible. Chulman touched one of the magic crystals and, with a serious expression, asked if Suho really wanted to be a hunter. Suho confidently replied, yes, he had decided since the moment he first awakened as a player. Chulman smiled brightly and responded, that's a great decision, though it seemed he was trying to hide how pleased he was that Suho wanted to work for them. On the other hand, Suho smiled to himself, thinking that Chulman really couldn't hide his expression. Chulman asked if there was any specific reason for Suho wanting to become a hunter. Suho replied that he was sure many people had reasons for wanting to become hunters, but for him, it was personal. He hated monsters and gates. He lost his entire family when he was younger due to the gate shock. He knew the dangers, but entering the gate alone was an emotional choice. He wondered if killing monsters would ease his frustration, but despite killing many, the anger in his heart wouldn't go away. That was when he realized what he had to do to prevent others from suffering like him. He told Chulman, don't let people lose something precious to monsters. He want to work for everyone's safety. With firm resolve, he said, I want to be a hunter of the Korean Association. Chulman was shocked by these statements. It was rare to see someone so committed to fighting for the safety of humanity. But he asked Suho if he was sure, as becoming a member of the Korean Hunter Association meant living as a civil servant hunter with pay quite a bit lower than hunters in private guilds. Suho responded that he was aware of that, but what he wanted more than pay was free access to various gates, priority in conquering them, something the Korean Hunter Association had, and also the imposition of strict punishment for player crimes. He said he wanted to work in that field, preferably in gate conquests. Dear listeners, no matter how much the Korean Hunter Association has priority conquest rights for various gates, they usually auction them off to private guilds. The reason? There's no incentive to sacrifice one's life attacking a gate with a low salary. It is often said that this path is chosen out of altruism, but most people want to become civil servant hunters for the stability of the job and the ability to earn money without entering the gates. Other civil servants are in a frenzy trying to avoid entering the gates by any means, but Suho is different. He wants to work in the field and talk about people's safety. He's truly the ideal type of civil servant hunter. Schulman was so happy he was practically dizzy. He told Suho it had been a long time since he met someone like him, so he would finish filling out the documents and other identification. To take the hunter's exam, Suho now needed to complete the aptitude test, which included a written and a practical exam. Schulman informed Suho that the registration for this year's exam was already closed and tomorrow was exam day. Suho was shocked and hadn't been aware of this, but Schulman reassured him that if he wanted, he could still be registered. This was one of the existing rules. Since Suho had conquered a gate alone, he could report it to the higher-ups and get approval. Schulman recommended Suho because he had great talent, but preparing for both the written and practical exams in just one day would be hard, if not impossible. Our protagonist, with many tricks up his sleeves, told Schulman that it was okay, and he should please register him. It's a good idea to take the exam for experience when I have the chance. It's just a test, so even if he fail, He can try again next time, he said with firm resolve. He told Shulman that he will take the tests all at once tomorrow. Suddenly, with a change in expression, Suho scratched his head and told Shulman that he didn't have money for the registration fees. He asked if Shulman could handle the magic crystals right away. Shulman replied that he understood and would take care of it while checking Suho's aptitude test. Suho thought to himself that for now the only person he could trust was brother Shulman. They had been very close in his past life, and that was the main reason he came to him as soon as he conquered the gate. Sometime later they had finished the aptitude test and deposited all the money from the magic crystals. Suho was surprised when he saw the alert. He had earned over 3 million won from the magic crystals. It was a bit embarrassing, but as a civil servant hunter, he received tax exemption benefits for magic crystals. Suho asked Shulman for one more favor. Shulman said he should ask away. Suho heard that the association had a library with workbooks and reference books related to tomorrow's test. Although tomorrow was the exam and it was too late, Suho felt he needed to cram. He asked Shulman if it was possible to prepare for the exam in the library. Of course, Shulman agreed. A few minutes later, he took Suho to the library. Shulman told him that he didn't need an employee card when leaving, so he should feel free to study there. Before he left, he wished Suho good luck on the exam tomorrow, and they bade their goodbyes. As he was leaving, Suho thought to himself that Shulman was still the same as before, always kind and trustworthy. Shulman didn't know that he would be the president of the association in the future. By the way, it was hard for Suho to pretend to know nothing. It felt like he was teasing Shulman, but if he acted like he already knew everything, Shulman would be suspicious. Now, Suho decided to find something precious in the library. He remembered major events from his past life, but couldn't recall every single detail. It would be helpful to acquire that skill in the library. As he walked closer to a shelf, a bright light shone from one of the books, and the book moved out by itself. Suho exclaimed, "This book is so big, it's from another world." In his past life, when he tried to gain information from the book, a simple sentence appeared, and there were separate ways to use it. Suho opened the massive book with otherworldly writings and placed it on his head. After a short while, nothing happened. Suho wondered why it wasn't working, because he had been told that this was the only way to use it. Suddenly, the system sent a message saying that the Library of Memories was interested in his story and was inviting him. Then, bang! Light shone from the huge book, and Suho was sent to an artificial world. The system welcomed him to the Library of Memories. The Library of Memories makes you remember everything you've seen or heard, even if it's painful or distressing. The human mind can endure for a long time thanks to the mechanism of forgetting, but once a person obtains the Library of Memories, they fall under the curse of memory. In Suho's past life, the original owner of this skill was the Hexagon Guild's manager, a former employee of the Korean Hunter Association. While studying in the library and preparing for a job change, she used this book as a pillow to sleep because sleeping face down was uncomfortable. It is said that she was lucky to get this skill, and thanks to her, Suho got this information. He figured that he would have to buy her a meal the next time he saw her in his current life. The system then asked Suho if he would like to donate his story to the Library of Memories. This skill provides overwhelming memory, and with it, Suho can restore all of his memories. As time passes, memories fade and get edited, so in order to capture everything accurately, especially the overlooked details, he must use this skill. Then the system told him that his story had been accepted, and the Library of Memories began to access and document his memories. After a short suspense, the system said that the Library of Memories had opened. The library also recommended necessary information to the user. Maybe because it was an illusionary space, the recording process felt quite strange to Suho. Now that he had acquired this skill, he decided to test it out, returning to his last memory from his past life. Suho could still feel the emotions from that time. As expected from the Library of Memories, he recalled those 4 selfish traitors who had prevented the end of the gates in order to survive. He vowed never to forget them. Suho then said that the memory of when he was falling was unpleasant, and that he should have thought of something else. Suddenly, from his memory, he saw the message the system had sent, saying it would grant him the opportunity to become stronger as the first to reach the realm of the transcendent. Suho was shocked to see that his system had rebooted, which meant that the system had sent him back. He had been unconscious during all of this, so he didn't know it was the system that had sent him to the past. He remembered acquiring the first SS grade skill and reaching the state of unity of the divine sword. But since he's the first to reach the state of transcendent, the system is giving him another opportunity. Suho had never heard of anything like this in his whole life. Does this mean his return to the past is not a coincidence? He wondered. In another scene, Suho stepped out of a taxi, still pondering how the system had sent him to the past. But whatever the reason, what's important is that he returned, and now he can prevent the horrible death he faced in his past life, and also stop the initial suppression of the unpredictable gates, which caused enormous casualties. Suho concluded that he would give it a try. Perhaps he can conquer the gates much faster than before. He can't afford to waste any precious time. By now, our protagonist has gotten close to the Nexus building, which is as tall as my dad's hotel. Nexus is a private hunter academy. They say it's the largest in the country, and it's really impressive. Suho will need a lot of money in the future, so he decided to earn some here. He entered the building, and the receptionist, with the fakest smile, welcomed him. She asked what brings him to Nexus. Suho replied that he would like to meet Director Kim Sue. The receptionist, with a change in expression, asked if he had scheduled an appointment. Suho said no, he just came by and has something to discuss with the director. The receptionist told him she's sorry, but he has to schedule in advance. Our protagonist knew they wouldn't let him see the director since he's just a commoner, so he told the receptionist to pass on a message to her. He said to tell her that the solo conqueror of the pre-catastrophe gate is here. And bang! Within a few seconds, the director came to see him. Such power. They exchanged pleasantries, and the director told Suho to have a seat. She heard he's the solo conqueror of the pre-catastrophe gate and asked what brings him to Nexus. Suho replied that he has come to ask for a scholarship. He mentioned that there's a hunter license test tomorrow, and he's taking the test too. After a short pause, the director cleared her throat and asked him how long it has been since he awakened. With a nonchalant face, Suho told her that he just awakened today. This statement shocked the director. She thought, wait a minute, did I just hear this guy correctly? She said so he is an unregistered hunter who awakened today and will be taking the hunter license test tomorrow. Not only that, but he's also the solo conqueror of the pre-catastrophe gate that occurred in Sindorm today. Suho responded that everything she heard was true. Right after awakening, he was lucky enough to have a connection with someone from the Hunters Association, who helped him secure a spot for the license test. And, by the way, he planned to aim for the top position in this test. Suho told the director that if he passed the test as the top candidate, she should please grant him the status of a Nexus scholarship student. And, of course, provide a scholarship. Suho thought to himself that it's hard for a complete rookie to become the top in the test, but he's a veteran who has conquered countless gates. Believe it or not, he added, the choice is yours. The director admitted it was impressive that he single-handedly conquered the gate, but pointed out that the hunter test is a different matter altogether. She added that the hunter's test has an average passing rate of less than 20%. Suho suggested that if he didn't come out on top in the test, she could disregard him. The same would go for the scholarship payment. The director then said there was one thing she was curious about. She noted that there are other great private hunter academies, like Hexagon and Prime. So why did he choose Nexus? Suho replied that it's because Nexus is in a regrettable situation. As far as he knows, Nexus Academy is the largest in the country, but in recent years, they have failed to produce a first or second place winner. So the number of students is noticeably decreasing. With an expression of deep thought, the director murmured to herself, sadly, it's true. They also need to start showing results, but no outstanding student has grown significantly. She considered what might happen if she accepted Suho's proposal, and he came out on top. The lone conqueror of the premonitory gate who passed the hunter test with the highest score. If word gets around that he's from Nexus, the one to benefit the most would be Nexus Academy, she thought. It's a proposal that leaves nothing to be desired, but there's one question that remains. She asked Suho how much she expected to receive from the scholarship. Our clever protagonist didn't answer directly, but instead asked her how much the scholarship was for the top student. The director replied that there would be a full refund of tuition fees for that year, along with an additional 30 million won as a congratulatory bonus for passing. And if the top student wanted, they could join the Nexus Guild immediately, as expected from the largest academy in the country, but Suho probably didn't expect this much. The director asked if he could tell her honestly how much he would like. Without much thought, Suho cleared his throat and said that he would accept 300 million won. 300 million won would be nice, he said, considering the additional benefits that come with passing as the top student and the size of the academy. It's a reasonable amount. Although the director was shocked by the money he was asking for, 300 million isn't a lot for Nexus, and our protagonist was only stating facts, so she couldn't really argue. After a pause, the director agreed. "Alright, if you pass as the top student, I'll pay you the 300 million won," she said. She then suggested he look around the academy while she prepared the contract. In the next scene, Suho was sightseeing around the academy. After a few trips, he remarked that the more he looked around, the more he realized how massive the place was. It seemed even larger than an amusement park. Once he enrolled in Nexus, he wouldn't lack anything. The tour guide, with a dry laugh, replied, "After all, it's the largest academy in the country." It seemed they had woken this guide from a nap, and Suho felt a bit sorry for him. He thanked the guide for showing him around even at this late hour. The guide replied that Suho was an important guest, so this was the least he could do. Our protagonist then noticed someone on the playground, though he couldn't see clearly from where he stood. He asked if the person was a student. The guide replied, "Yes, he's the most dedicated student in the academy, and he's training at this hour again today." The student's name was Daehan, and the guide called out to him, reminding him that while practice is important, taking care of his body is crucial too. Daehan replied that, as a third-year student, he needed to work even harder. Upon hearing Daehan's name, Suho remembered that he had formed a few raid parties with Daehan in his previous life. Back then, Daehan was the top tanker in the country. His mental strength and defense were immense. It was a shame that the position of pure tankers weakened over time. However, seeing him holding an axe instead of a shield suggested Daehan hadn't yet found his true aptitude. But this was perfect. Since things had come to this, our protagonist might as well lay some groundwork in advance. Since Daehan would later join Nexus, Suho planned to build a connection with him and bring him into the Great Hunter Association in this life. The tour guide introduced them, and with a shy smile, Daehan said it was nice to meet Suho. Suho told Daehan that from what he'd heard, it seemed like Daehan was a test taker. He then asked if Daehan planned to use a battle axe as his main weapon. Daehan replied, "Yes, that's right." Suho, with a polite tone, asked why he'd chosen the battle axe specifically. After some thought, Daehan replied with a smile that he was aiming to be a melee user, and after consulting with the academy, they recommended the battle axe. They said such a weapon needs to suit one's physique from the start to handle it well. The tour guide added that when it comes to destructive power, nothing can match a battle axe. But all these were just beginner's guesses, not something our protagonist, a pro, would take at face value. Daehan had only been using the battle axe. He was a bit of a slow learner, and it would take too long to try out different weapons. He explained that it had taken him 2 years to become proficient with the battle axe alone, and he still wasn't very good at it. Our protagonist, smirking to himself, thought, that's because the battle axe doesn't fit Daehan's aptitude at all. He wondered if it was perseverance or just stubbornness. Daehan should have switched weapons if his proficiency wasn't improving from the start. It was so obvious that Suho felt disappointed and smacked his forehead. The protagonist thought to himself that the largest academy in the country was surprisingly lax. Noticing his change in expression, the guide asked if there was a problem. Suho replied that he was thinking of something else, then suggested that Daehan use a weapon he was more comfortable with. After all players receive stat adjustments, he said. Surprised, Daehan asked if that was possible, and Suho explained that he could quickly increase his skill proficiency with the skill correction effect. Although other factors depend on personal knowledge and experience, the battle axe didn't seem to suit Daehan. The fact that it took him 2 years to reach proficiency indicated poor synergy with the weapon. Daehan was shocked, feeling like a kid receiving advice from a parent. It was true that the battle axe has high instantaneous destructive power. However, the gap after each attack was too long, leaving him vulnerable to counterattacks. Furthermore, Daehan's size was too large to be adequately protected by a tank. Daehan was taken aback, saying, "Really? I've been holding only the axe for a whole 3 years." Suho tried to boost his morale, saying that if he had the perseverance to handle a weapon that didn't suit him for 3 years, then Daehan's true aptitude was likely closer to that of a tank. Suho suggested that he try wearing a kite shield on his left arm and wielding a one-handed bludgeon in his right hand. With that setup, his practical score would improve significantly. Daehan asked if it would be difficult to change positions at this point, considering the test was tomorrow. Suho leaned forward like a father talking sense to his son and asked, "What do you think is the core of a party?" "It's not the mage. The core of a party is the tank. The tank needs to draw aggro while protecting the mage and healer for the party to function properly. Wouldn't it be better to wield a shield to use crowd control in various ways?" He explained that crowd control is a technique that disrupts the opponent's actions, causing conditions like incapacitation or stun. Excited, Daehan agreed that everything Suho said sounded good and decided to give it a try. Our protagonist, with a proud grin, thought to himself that it was a good thing Daehan wasn't discouraged and was quick to make rational decisions. Suho wished him good luck, and Daehan thanked him and left. After a short silence, the tour guide called Suho and said that he was asked by the director to give Suho a tour of the academy, so he introduced him as a guest. The tour guide asked if he was here as an instructor by chance. Judging by the way he laid out Daehan's flaws, he seemed to have an understanding of advice and contracts as well. Suho was nervous and thought to himself that it would be suspicious if someone without a license knew this much. Then he told the tour guide that he's not an instructor. Instead, he's more like a stakeholder. The tour guide was surprised and wanted to ask more questions. But before he could continue, Suho asked if the contract was ready, as it seemed quite some time had passed. The tour guide replied that he had just received a call about that, and they should head back to the director's office. The next day, the day of the Hunters Test in the Korean Hunters Association, the area in front of the association was filled with examinees, all with their weapons, ready to obtain the hunter's license. Everyone honed their skills for this day and got into peak condition, but An Suho, the man of the hour who conquered the gate alone, was in his worst condition, drained of strength from wandering around too much the day before. An automated voice informed all examinees to line up in order of their test numbers. They would proceed with the drug test one by one. Although the test was done to prevent doping, Suho thought it was pointless since hunters who do drugs usually don't consume drugs, but instead use skill buffs. Suho looked around and noted that the test takers' levels were at most 5, but one person had a magic wavelength that wouldn't come from someone at level 5. Quite a few people had been buffed. Suddenly, the system notified Suho that his ability to distinguish magic was more sensitive than others. It congratulated him on mastering the magic detection skill, which made it clearer to spot cheaters in the hall. Suho reflected on how, despite the fact that the abuse of buff skills hadn't surfaced yet, there were already this many cheaters. He thought he'd need to sort it out eventually. Looking up, he saw Shulman, who encouraged him to do well. Suho felt grateful that someone clean like Shulman was there. As Suho walked around, he overheard a man in white asking his friend if he did well on the written test. The friend, disappointed, replied that he might have to retake the test. Suho thought to himself that the written test had been insanely difficult for him as well, but thanks to his library of memories, it had been a piece of cake. It felt like he had unintentionally become a cheater. Team leader Chulman came down and asked Suho how his test had gone. Suho replied that he thought he would pass it, but then asked what brought Chulman here. Chulman explained that he was assisting since the association was always short-staffed. Regarding the exam, Chulman commented that this was the hardest written test ever. and Suho's confidence was impressive. Suho told Chulman he wanted to ask something. He'd noticed that they hadn't done a buff check during the test. He'd suddenly felt the effects of buffs earlier, so he asked Chulman to check it out. To prevent doping, the association also conducted urine and blood tests, confiscated belongings to prevent item-based cheating, and required examinees to change into exam uniforms. However, Suho wondered if they didn't specifically check for cheating through skills. Magic detection would make it easier to spot cheaters using tools. Chulman was just hearing of this and thanked Suho, assuring him that he would check well before the practical test. Suho smiled and asked him to do so, saying he would go prepare for the practical test. But as he was leaving, Chulman stopped him. He told Suho he personally wanted him to succeed and looked forward to working with him in the future. Suho thanked him. About 30 minutes later, at the practical test venue, an automated voice informed the test takers that the test would be postponed by 2 hours due to issues with the dive capsules. They were told to have lunch in the cafeteria and wait in the lounge or training area. While others panicked, Suho smiled to himself. Thinking the capsule issue was just an excuse, Chulman was likely taking measures against cheating buffs, as expected. There were 1,200 candidates in this test with a passing rate below 10%. If they could identify the cheaters, perhaps about 7% would pass, making those who succeeded pure top-notch talents. Suho planned to keep an eye out for any useful candidates. Meanwhile, a man approached an examinee, challenging him to a spar. The examinee snapped, telling the man to get lost. The challenger calmly replied that he wasn't looking for a fight, just a spar. The man accused the examinee of being scared his skills would be revealed. Furious, the examinee grabbed him by the collar, cursing at him. The challenger drew a weapon, daring him to fight, but before he could attack, Suho blocked his weapon mid-air, pushing the man back a few meters. Suho told the examinee he'd handle the troublemaker and asked him to calm down. The challenger asked who Suho was, assuming he was an officer, but Suho clarified that he was a fellow test taker. When the troublemaker asked why Suho was interfering, he introduced himself and offered to spar with him instead. The challenger refused, calling Suho weak, which confused our protagonist. The challenger warned him not to get cocky just because he'd blocked his attack and told him to get lost. Suho smacked his forehead in disappointment and, with a grin, taunted the man, suggesting he might be scared. This pushed the challenger over the edge. Irritated, he agreed, calling Suho names. They decided to take it to the sparring arena after getting supervisor approval. At the arena, other examinees gathered to watch. Some muttered about how reckless they were, calling them attention seekers. A few minutes later, the supervisor arrived, explaining that only training weapons provided by the association were allowed. He warned he'd stop the spar if things got too heated, then signaled for them to begin. As the fight started, the challenger attacked Suho with intense aggression, but Suho dodged effortlessly. Shocked, the challenger realized Suho could use the split skill, and he grew even angrier when Suho smiled back at him. Enraged, he threatened to tear Suho's mouth apart. But before he could raise his weapon, Suho stepped on it and taunted him, calling him weak. The insult hit hard, bruising the challenger's pride. It turned out Suho knew this man from his past life. This challenger was known as the Mad Swordsman, and his name was Park Young, a man with a deep thirst for power, always eager to challenge experts whenever he had the chance. It's all because he desired even more advanced swordsmanship and greater power. His excessive thirst for power eventually turned him into a hunter-killer. Who would have thought this guy would be in this cohort? Suho said to himself that Park Young's skills were impressive when they faced each other in his last life. What a completely weak person now. Suho plans to take preventive measures to keep this guy from making the same mistakes. Then he gave him a kick that sent him flying backward. Suho was like, how dull. He was talking big earlier, so he thought he was someone great. Park Young was in shock and asked Suho what's with his immense strength. Our protagonist, with a proud grin, asked if he wants to keep going. Even if Park Young tries to rush at him, it won't work. Suho said to himself that this guy must be flustered, since this is his first time facing a level 10 player. Of all the ones he has fought so far, the strongest one was probably level 5. Suddenly, Park Young, with a change in expression, gave an evil smile. While getting up, he told Suho that he's an interesting guy. Now he sees why he was so relaxed. Park Young said that he's going all out. Our protagonist was so chill and decided to play with him. The guy began attacking with all his strength, but Suho blocked them with one hand. Suho commended the guy that his attacks were definitely heavier than before. Park Young snapped and asked if Suho is going to keep acting all relaxed. Now, with a change in aura, he bent down and asked our protagonist if he can stop this attack too. Suho took a few steps back upon seeing this posture. This is Park Young's original technique, called the Dragon Sword technique. Park Young noticed our protagonist was shaken, and he yelled that he should die, and bang, he launched the attack. All my cameraman could picture was smoke in the area. Park Young, with a proud grin, said to himself that he could feel the impact. It hit directly. He thought he won. Suddenly, as the smoke cleared, he was shocked to see Suho unfazed. With a mocking laugh, Suho said that he blocked it. Park Young was terrified and shocked at the same time. He asked how Suho managed to block it. Suho scratched his head and replied that he's not generous enough to take a hit from such a slow attack. Suho said to himself that on a more serious note, the attack would have been dire, assuming Park Young was in his future self. But now it's not the Dragon Sword technique yet. It's just a basic sword technique. Of course, there's no way a beginner without a hunter's license could have mastered the original technique. As our protagonist was thinking nothing but in thoughts, Park Young called him a bastard and attacked. The attack was so sudden that Suho lost his balance and knelt on the ground. With bloodlust in his eyes, Park Young saw this as an opportunity. With a proud grin, he yelled that it's over for Suho. But before he could land the final strike, Suho vanished from the spot and punched him in the jaw. Park, while falling, was like, "How did you do that?" Suho replied that he has told him before that his attacks are too slow. Park Young fell to the ground with a few bones and pride shattered. Suho decided to stop here for now. If he damages more of Park Young's confidence, it will really cause big trouble. Now that he's fixated on Suho, he won't focus on anyone else until he defeats Suho. Therefore, he won't turn into a hunter-killer in this life. And also, the test environment will become much quieter now. It was as if the supervisor was in a trance as he watched the fight. Suho called to his attention, telling him that he accidentally knocked out Park Young. They should please take care of him until he wakes up. The supervisor agreed that he shouldn't worry, and Suho thanked him. An unknown time later, it was time for the test, and the test takers were being placed into tubes. It was Suho's turn, and as he was about to enter the tube, he said to himself that there are more skilled managers now than before. They are probably buff doping inspectors disguised as technicians. Suho overheard one of the inspectors telling an examinee that he's not compatible with the capsule, so he will be doing the test somewhere else. But the truth is that they caught him cheating, so they are taking him away. Now all the settings are ready, and the technician told Suho to lie down. They said that if he feels any strange sensation during the dive process, he should press the button to immediately request emergency help. Suho replied that he understood. The technician pressed the button for the commencement of his practical test. Inside the capsule, the system stated that the Hunter practical test is now activated, and it's connecting to the user's consciousness. The dive process started from 5% up to 100%. When the system informed him that the dive process had been completed, the healer practical test scenario program was now running. Suho was sent to a virtual world, more like a simulation. He said to himself that this exam is particularly difficult, especially with the low pass rate for healers. He wondered why, and as he looked around, he saw a lady crying and asking him to save her. She cried that there's a person stuck under a boulder. Suho couldn't believe they set the program scenario like this. The Great Hunter Association really has no sense of moderation. Our protagonist now feels that taking this hunter's test will be traumatizing for him, and this is why healers are expensive. He then formed up his sleeve like a surgeon and decided to get started. The practical test can be considered the core of the hunter test. The key to the practical test being to demonstrate how well the player fits the class they have chosen. The simulation scenario in the program changed everywhere, and the passing criteria varied each time. Usually it ranges from 1-to-1 battles to 1 versus many. The player's score is determined by how long he or she lasts and how many kills are gained. But the healer exam is a little special. Unlike other offensive classes, the healing power amount and characteristics of healers don't hold much significance. While exceptional healing abilities are certainly important, the virtue of a healer, sacrifice, is considered more important from everyone's perspective. So healers who save people even at the risk of their own lives are awarded higher scores. In other words, in this test, a healer has to die while protecting the patient. But the problem is that Suho's status window specs are still fully intact, his level is higher, and in this case, he would have to get beaten up on purpose for a long time before he dies, unlike other players. Suho removed a sword that was stuck in the ground and said to himself, why would he be crazy enough to let himself get beaten to death? No matter what, asking someone who already died to die again is just too much. The lady was still screaming for help. There are a lot of screams he can hear right now, but in reality, there are only dead people and nothing else except for this one person who's screaming for help. Suho walked up to her and asked if she's okay. Such a dumb question. I could slap our protagonist right now. The lady, with slurred words, said that the monsters will soon be back, and they should run away before they return. Dear listeners, the test mission is to protect this lady until the very end. Suho said that she shouldn't worry, that a rescue team will soon arrive, and until then, he will keep her safe. He stood in front of her like a lone warrior, ready to protect his loved ones. Meanwhile, some test takers were already done. Obviously, they didn't pass. This guy was disappointed, saying he could have done better. The technician thanked him for his hard work and told him to please gather his belongings and head home. The test taker thanked her with a sad face and left. The technician looked at his result from the capsule and noted that he lasted only 9 minutes and 4 seconds. Men of culture. Maybe because the difficulty is high, this season's scores are particularly low. She looked at Suho's capsule and asked the director how long he's been in there. It seems like he's been in there for quite a while. The director replied that the test taker Suho has been in the capsule for 30 minutes. The lady was shocked, perplexed, and bamboozled at the same time. She was like, no way, not 15 minutes but 30 minutes? She decided to see for herself, and behold, it had just been over 30 minutes. She exclaimed that the test taker Suho must be a good fighter. She asked if he's a warrior, and the director replied no, he's a healer. The lady snapped and told the director that frequent lying is a sickness. The director assured her that he's not lying. From the capsule, they could see what's going on in each player's virtual world. She looked through the capsule and saw that Suho is holding a sword, so how is he a healer? Suddenly, she was shocked to see him use healing skills on the patient. Now she's more confused, wondering if he's really a healer. She said it's amazing that a healer can fight like this. She asked if Suho would be disqualified if he didn't get beaten to death. The director replied that he thought so at first too, but there's actually no reason for disqualification. A healer's main goal is to protect the patient until the very end. Even while doing that, Suho is fulfilling all requirements. Instead of abandoning the patient and fighting, he is properly escorting and staying close to the patient, and he's also healing the patient from time to time. She said that this examinee is now risking his life to protect the patient, and if all the conditions are met, there is absolutely no reason to disqualify him, even if he doesn't die. In fact, the practical program doesn't even intervene, so what reason do they have to disqualify him? They both said that it seems like the top student in this exam has been decided. In the virtual world, our protagonist was slaying monsters scarier than my girlfriend's mom. He slayed them with swag, but this is not enough. He said he needs to be a little faster. Then he increased his attack speed and slayed multiple monsters in an instant. Suddenly, the system sent him a message saying that his level of understanding of the footplay is very high, therefore he has mastered the footplay skill. As suspected, even if where Suho is right now is virtual reality, no one can escape the surveillance of the system. From the system's perspective, it determines that the player is moving their body directly, allowing for the mastery of physical skills. Although the experience gain rate is lower compared to physically overworking the body, it's still perfect for skill training. Suho has gained various skills from slaying monsters in this virtual world. In addition to that, he gained swordsmanship and he upgraded all the sword skills he acquired to a rank.
We will end the show for now. We are hoping for your support. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. Manhwa Caster out.